Good evening. I hope you've had a great day today. Welcome to BVJ's Bedtime Stories. I'm Big Voice J, and this is the show where we get you ready for a good night's sleep with public domain short stories just for you. Links to all the stories can be found in the show notes at bedtimewithbvj.com. And if you'd like to support the show, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in every post. Tonight we continue our story, The Adventure of the Three Gables, by Arthur Conan Doyle. We found the Three Gables a very different establishment to the orderly household of the previous day. A small group of idlers had assembled at the garden gate, while a couple of constables were examining the windows and the geranium beds. Within, we met a gray old gentleman who introduced himself as a lawyer, together with a bustling, rubicund inspector, who greeted Holmes as an old friend. "Well, Mr. Holmes, no chance for you in this case, I'm afraid. Just a common, ordinary burglary, and well within the capacity of the poor old police. No experts need apply." "I am sure the case is in very good hands," said Holmes. "Merely a common burglary, you say?" "Quite so. We know pretty well who the men are and where to find them. It is that gang of Barney Stockdale. They've been seen about here." "Excellent. What did they get?" "Well, they don't seem to have got much. Mrs. Maberley was chloroformed and the house was... here is the lady herself." Our friend of yesterday, looking very pale and ill, had entered the room, leaning upon a little maidservant. "You gave me good advice, Mr. Holmes," said she, smiling ruefully. "Alas, I did not take it. I did not wish to trouble Mr. Sutro, and so I was unprotected." "I only heard of it this morning," the lawyer explained. "Mr. Holmes advised me to have some friend in the house. I neglected his advice, and I have paid for it." "You look wretchedly ill," said Holmes. "Perhaps you are hardly equal to telling me what occurred." "It is all here," said the inspector, tapping a bulky notebook. "Still, if the lady is not too exhausted, there really is so little to tell. I have no doubt that wicked Susan had planned an entrance for them. They must have known the house to an inch. I was conscious for a moment of the chloroformed rag which was thrust over my mouth, but I have no notion how long I may have been senseless. When I woke, one man was at the bedside, and another was rising with a bundle in his hand from among my son's luggage, which was partially opened and littered over the floor. Before he could get away, I sprang up and seized him." "You took a big risk," said the inspector. "I clung to him, but he shook me off, and the other may have struck me, for I can remember no more. Mary, the maid, heard the noise and began screaming out of the window. That brought the police, but the rascals had got away." "What did they take?" "Well, I don't think there's anything of value missing. I'm sure there was nothing in my son's trunks." "Did the men leave no clue?" "There was one sheet of paper which I may have torn from the man that I grasped. It was lying all crumpled on the floor. It is in my son's handwriting." "Which means that it is not of much use," said the inspector. "Now, if it had been in the burglars—" "Exactly," said Holmes. "What rugged common sense. Nonetheless, I should be curious to see it." The inspector drew a folded sheet of foolscap from his pocketbook. "I never pass anything, however trifling," said he with some pomposity. "That is my advice to you, Mr. Holmes. In 25 years' experience, I have learned my lesson. There is always the chance of finger marks or something." Holmes inspected the sheet of paper. "What do you make of it, Inspector?" "Seems to be the end of some novel, as far as I can see." "It may certainly prove to be the end of an odd tale," said Holmes. "You've noticed a number on the top of the page. It is 245. Where are the odd 244 pages?" "Well, I suppose the burglars got those. Much good may it do 'em. Seems odd to break into a house in order to steal such papers as that. Does it suggest anything to you, Inspector?" "Yes, sir. It suggested in the hurry the rascals just grabbed at what first came to hand. I wish them joy of what they got." "Why should they go to my son's things?" asked Mrs. Maberley. "Well, they found nothing valuable downstairs, so they tried their luck upstairs. That is how I read it. What do you make of it, Mr. Holmes?" "I must think it over, Inspector. Come to the window, Watson." Then, as we stood together, he read over the fragment of paper. It began in the middle of a sentence and ran like this. "Face bled considerably from the cuts and blows, but it was nothing to the bleeding of his heart as he saw that lovely face, the face for which he had been prepared to sacrifice his very life, looking out at his agony and humiliation. She smiled. Yes, by heaven, she smiled, like the heartless fiend she was, as he looked up at her. It was at that moment that love died and hate was born. Man must live for something. If it is not for your embrace, my lady, then it shall surely be for your undoing and my complete revenge." "What grammar!" said Holmes with a smile as he handed the paper back to the inspector. "Did you notice how the he suddenly changed to my? The writer was so carried away by his own story that he imagined himself at the supreme moment to be the hero." "It seemed mighty poor stuff," said the inspector as he replaced it in his book. "What? Are you off, Mr. Holmes?" "I don't think there's anything more for me to do now that the case is in such capable hands. By the way, Mrs. Maberley, did you say you wish to travel?" "It has always been my dream, Mr. Holmes." "Where would you like to go? Cairo, Madeira, the Riviera?" "Oh, if I had the money, I would go round the world." "Quite so, round the world. Well, good morning. I may drop you a line in the evening." As we passed the window, I caught a glimpse of the inspector's smile and shake of the head. "These clever fellows always have a touch of madness." That was what I read in the inspector's smile. "Now, Watson, we are at the last lap of our little journey," said Holmes, when we were back in the roar of central London once more. "I think we had best clear the matter up at once, and it would be well that you should come with me, for it is safer to have a witness when you are dealing with such a lady as Isadora Klein." We had taken a cab and were speeding to some address in Grosvenor Square. Holmes had been sunk in thought, but he roused himself suddenly. "By the way, Watson, I suppose you see it all clearly." "No, can't say that I do. I only gather that we are going to see the lady who's behind all this mischief." "Exactly. But does the name Isadora Klein convey nothing to you? She was, of course, the celebrated beauty. There was never a woman to touch her. She is pure Spanish, the real blood of the masterful conquistadors, and her people have been leaders in Pernambuco for generations. She married the aged German sugar king Klein, and presently found herself the richest as well as the most lovely widow upon earth. Then there was an interval of adventure when she pleased her own tastes. She had several lovers, and Douglas Maberley, one of the most striking men in London, was one of them. It was by all accounts more than an adventure with him. He was not a society butterfly, but a strong, proud man who gave and expected all. But she is the belle dame sans merci of fiction. When her caprice is satisfied, the matter is ended. And if the other party in the matter can't take her word for it, she knows how to bring it home to him." "Then that was his own story." "Ah, you're piecing it together now. I hear that she is about to marry the young Duke of Lomond, who might almost be her son. His Grace's ma might overlook the age, but a big scandal would be a different matter. So it is imperative. Here we are." It was one of the finest corner houses of the West End. A machine-like footman took up our cards and returned with word that the lady was not at home. "Then we shall wait until she is," said Holmes cheerfully. The machine broke down. "Not at home means not at home to you," said the footman. "Good," Holmes answered. "That means that we shall not have to wait. Kindly give this note to your mistress." He scribbled 3 or 4 words upon a sheet of his notebook, folded it, and handed it to the man. "What did you say, Holmes?" I asked. "I simply wrote, 'Shall it be the police then?' I think that should pass us in." It did, with amazing celerity. A minute later, we were in an Arabian Nights drawing room, vast and wonderful, and a half-gloom picked out with an occasional pink electric light. The lady had come, I felt, to that time of life when even the proudest beauty finds the half-light more welcome. She rose from a settee as we entered, tall, queenly, a perfect figure, a lovely mask-like face with 2 wonderful Spanish eyes which looked murder at us both. "What is this intrusion and this insulting message?" she asked, holding up the slip of paper. "I need not explain, madame. I have too much respect for your intelligence to do so, though I confess that intelligence has been surprisingly at fault of late." "How so, sir?" "By supposing that your hired bullies could frighten me from my work. Surely no man would take up my profession if it were not that danger attracts him. It was you, then, who forced me to examine the case of young Maberley." "I have no idea what you are talking about. What have I to do with hired bullies?" Holmes turned away wearily. "Yes, I have underrated your intelligence. Well, good afternoon. Stop! Where are you going?" "To Scotland Yard." We had not got halfway to the door before she had overtaken us and was holding his arm. She had turned in a moment from steel to velvet. "Come and sit down, gentlemen. Let us talk this matter over. I feel that I may frank with you, Mr. Holmes. You have the feelings of a gentleman. How quick a woman's instinct is to find it out. I will treat you as a friend." "I cannot promise to reciprocate, madam. I am not the law, but I represent justice as far as my feeble powers go. I am ready to listen, and then I will tell you how I will act. No doubt it was foolish of me to threaten a brave man like yourself. What was really foolish, madame, is that you have placed yourself in the power of a band of rascals who may blackmail or give you away." No, I am not so simple. Since I have promised to be frank, I may say that no one save Barney Stockdale and Susan, his wife, have the least idea who their employer is. As to them, well, it is not the first." She smiled and nodded with a charming, coquettish intimacy. "I see. You've tested them before." "They are good hounds who run silent. Such hounds have a way sooner or later of biting the hand that feeds them. They will be arrested for this burglary. The police are already after them. They will take what comes to them. That is what they are paid for. I shall not appear in the matter, unless I bring you into it." No, you would not. You are a gentleman. It is a woman's secret. In the first place, you must give back this manuscript." She broke into a ripple of laughter and walked to the fireplace. There was a calcined mess when she broke up with the poker. "Shall I give this back?" she asked. So roguish and exquisite did she look as she stood before us with a challenging smile that I felt of all of Holmes's criminals, this was the one whom he would find it hardest to face. However, he was immune from sentiment. "That seals your fate," he said coldly. "You are very prompt in your actions, madam, but you have overdone it on this occasion." She threw the poker down with a clatter. "How hard you are," she cried. "May I tell you the whole story?" "I fancy I could tell it to you, but you must look at it with my eyes, Mr. Holmes. You must realize it from the point of view of a woman who sees all her life's ambition about to be ruined at the last moment. Is such a woman to be blamed if she protects herself? The original sin was yours. Yes, I admit it. He was a dear boy, Douglas, but it so chanced that he could not fit into my plans. He wanted marriage, Mr. Holmes. with a penniless commoner. Nothing less would serve him. Then he became pertinacious. Because I had given, he seemed to think that I still must give, and to him only. It was intolerable. At last I had to make him realize it. By hiring ruffians to beat him under your own window. You do indeed seem to know everything. Well, it is true, Barney and the boys drove him away, and were, I admit, a little rough in doing so. But what did he do then? Could I have believed that a gentleman would do such an act? He wrote a book in which he described his own story. I, of course, was the wolf, he the lamb. It was all there under different names, of course, but who in all London would have failed to recognize it? What do you say to that, Mr. Holmes? Well, he was within his rights. It was as if the air of Italy had got into his blood and brought with it the old cruel Italian spirit. He wrote to me and sent me a copy of his book that I might have the torture of anticipation. There were 2 copies, he said, one for me, one for his publisher. How do you know the publishers had not reached him? I knew who his publisher was. It is not his only novel, you know. I found out that he had not heard from Italy. Then came Douglas's sudden death. So long as that other manuscript was in the world, there was no safety for me. Of course, it must be among his effects, and those would be returned to his mother. I set the gang at work. One of them got into the house as servant. I wanted to do the thing honestly. I really and truly did. I was ready to buy the house and everything in it. I offered any price she cared to ask. I only tried the other way when everything else had failed. Now, Mr. Holmes, granting that I was too hard on Douglas, and God knows I am sorry for it, what else could I do with my whole future at stake? Sherlock Holmes shrugged his shoulders. Well, well, said he. I suppose I shall have to compound a felony as usual. How much does it cost to go round the world in first-class style? The lady stared in amazement. Could it be done on £5,000? Well, I should think so, indeed. Very good. I think you will sign me a check for that, and I will see that it comes to Mrs. Maberley. You owe her a little change of air. Meantime, lady, he wagged a cautionary forefinger, have a care, have a care. You can't play with edged tools forever without cutting those dainty hands. We are always on the hunt for great stories like these to feature on the show. You can send your suggestions to bigvoicej@gmail.com. We've got a YouTube channel full of stories from the show. Go to tiny.cc/BVJ Bedtime. If you found some value in our storytelling tonight, don't forget to show the love. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link on every post. Thank you so much for listening. Good night.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.